Welcome, everybody, to the Huddle, KGUN9's weekly streaming sports talk show. I'm KGUN9 Sports Director Jason Barr, joined by our main anchor, as always, almost always, Pat Parris. Pat, good afternoon. How are you today?
Pretty good, Jason. Got a lot of basketball to talk about, which, of course, is one of my favorite subjects.
Well, there's been a lot of changes to the Arizona basketball roster. It was actually looking kind of barren a little bit, maybe about a month or so ago, but Tommy Lloyd has filled the roster going into next year. So what I thought we'd do this week, Pat, is go through the new players who are just arrived and kind of break them down a little bit and talk about how much they're going to add to the team and what we think of them and what we think they're going to contribute and what role they might have. So how does that sound?
That sounds great.
All right, so let's start with the first one, and that's going to be the newest addition, and that's Keyshawn Johnson. Now, Keyshawn, it's K-E-S-H-O-D, but he pronounces it Keyshawn Johnson. Keyshawn Johnson's a transfer from San Diego State. He's a graduate transfer. He had 14 points in the national championship game in the loss to UConn. Pat, his numbers won't jump out at you. Only averaged 7.7 points per game, but shot better than 50%, so he was a selective shooter, 5 rebounds, only 26% from three, so he's not a three-point shooter, but he started all 39 games for San Diego State, so he's likely to come in here as a starter because Kentucky offered him as well. And probably a good defender is what we're hearing as well. So, your thoughts first off on Keyshawn Johnson. How excited are you that he's an Arizona Wildcat?
Well, when we talked a month ago, we were a little bit concerned about where they were at. You and I were not sky is falling like some fans were pretty upset about how barren things were. I think we both knew that last year Tommy Lloyd picked up guys in July and even August in order to fill out the roster, and they did pretty well in the regular season last year. I think with the addition of Johnson, what I see here is, if you're just a stats guy and you look at the stats, you're not going to be overwhelmed, but stats don't tell the story of a player like this. A player like this is a guy who gets to done with his 4 years. He's got an extra year, so he's got a graduate year coming up. His team win as far as they can go. They're not going to be as good. San Diego State will not make a Final Four run this coming year. And so I think he looked around and said, okay, I can go to one of these powerhouse programs and learn a little something and maybe even improve enough to get an NBA look. And so he looked at Kentucky. I think it was Oklahoma was one of the schools, and then
USC
and USC and Arizona. Although I don't know that USC was all that high up in the final.
It's going to be hard to get playing time at USC this year. They're loaded.
Yeah, that's right. So I think he looked at Kentucky and Arizona, and he picked Arizona. And I think what I like most about him is everybody in the same breath that they mentioned that he's a guy with that is a fan favorite with his Showtime dunks and his ability to run the floor, but they also say he's a great defender. And I think we all know that that's an important element as well, because that's how this team is built. You've got to defend on one end to start running on the other end, and then you're fast at the other end. Even if you're in your half court, you're going to move it fast and try to score. So this is the kind of player that fits the mold of Tommy Lloyd.
I wonder why he's choosing to transfer from San Diego State. It seemed like he wanted to do that right away. There was a joint statement by him and the school. San Diego State seemed like a perfectly good place to play. We'll eventually hear from him. I know you mentioned Power 5, but things have changed now, Pat, a little bit with NIL and everything. And we'll hear from him. I wonder if he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He was not a high recruit coming out of high school, only a 3-star recruit. So maybe the chance to play for a Power 5 program is an itch that he wants to scratch, but we'll hear from him eventually on that.
Right, and I think, Jason, what we're seeing with the transfer portal now is it's a redo for a lot of these guys, a do-over. Let's call it a do-over. So you were a 3-star, you didn't get a lot of recruiting from the Power 5 conferences, and so you go to San Diego State. Well, now he gets a do-over. He helped lead them, Jason, to the national championship game. I don't think there's any question. Yeah, he didn't stuff the box score with all these numbers, but I think he had double-digit game against UConn, right? I
14.
think
he was the leading scorer in that game.
So I think the point is, in this do-over world we live in now of college basketball, you always get a chance to do what you didn't get a chance to do when you were a younger player, and that's you show a few things, you get that do-over, you jump in the transfer portal, and all of a sudden Arizona and Kentucky and USC come knocking at your door.
Well, that's a heck of a segue, Pat, because do-over really describes this second guy, Jaden Bradley, because Jaden Bradley was recruited by Arizona a year ago, instead went to Alabama. He was a five-star recruit, McDonald's All-American just last year. He played freshman year for the terrific Alabama team, real terrific by their top player, certainly. But in and out of the lineup at Alabama. Played only 5 minutes in the Sweet 16 loss to San Diego State, and played 8 minutes and did not score in their second round game. So he didn't really crack the lineup or the starting lineup that much at the beginning of the season. Then midway through, played some minutes and then fell out of the rotation again late in the year for Alabama. Obviously highly credentialed if you're going to be a five-star and a McDonald's guy. He is a point guard. The Wildcats do have a point guard coming back in Kylan Boswell. To me, Kylan Boswell deserves to be the starting point guard based on how he played at the end of last year. He was outplaying Kirk Kriisa in my mind. So I don't know if they plan to play Bradley with Kylan Boswell.
I bet they do.
I think that would be some of the case. But your thoughts on Jaden Bradley, a 6'3", I believe, point guard, transferring after only 1 year at Alabama?
I think he got lost there. I think he got lost in the shuffle of being, an Alabama program that was absolutely loaded, and then you add to that all of the outside forces on that team that made them come up way short in the tournament. I think in his mind it was a smart move to leave, and it was also a smart move. As a Wildcat fan, I'd say it's a smart move to come back to the school he probably should have come to anyway. But I think to your point, Jason, about the playing time, don't forget, in this Tommy Lloyd offense, once the guy dribbles the ball past half court, the point guard, you'd be hard pressed to figure out which guy is the point guard in a lot of cases, because of the rotation, the set, the way they're moving the ball, guys are moving, they're rotating spots on the floor. I think this is a perfect example of, you can have two quote unquote point guards and still be able to have them on the court at the same time, because you inevitably become more of a shooting guard as soon as you get into that half court set anyway. So I think they'll figure out a way. I don't think it's Kylan Boswell plays X amount of minutes, and when he sits on the bench, then Bradley comes out. I just don't see it that way. I think
no, I know, but I see one of them will be in the game at all times, probably.
Yeah, there's no question about that. But I think they can play,
together
60-70% of the time together.
Yeah, and as far as falling out of the lineup, Umar Ballo fell out of the lineup at Gonzaga, and look how he's become.
Right.
So it can happen. It can happen. I'm just giving the bio here so everybody knows. Jason Barr, Pat Parris, the Huddle here on Tuesday, May 23rd, and we're talking about the changes and the additions to the Arizona basketball roster. Feel free to comment in if you'd like. We'll be happy to read it if it's clean. Okay, the next one we're going to bring up is not somebody new in the last couple of months, but he's somebody who's going to be a true freshman on the team coming up this year, Pat, and that's KJ Lewis. He's a 6'4" wing. What's interesting about KJ, Pat, is that he actually went to elementary school in Vail. For the national audience, Vail is a suburb of Tucson, not the Vail, Colorado. But then he moved to El Paso. UCLA offered him. I believe he was a 4-star. He's a wing, not a point guard, and committed earlier to Arizona. Your thoughts on KJ Lewis, and also having a quasi-local guy who's not just a bench warmer or not just a walk-on, a local guy who's going to play?
No, this is another guy like a Kylan Boswell who comes in, and he's got some credentials behind him with some.
Well, Kylan Boswell was only 17 though. Kylan Boswell was a high school.
You're right. Thankfully, he'll be 18, and we can just start calling him
He's 18 already.
Maybe we just call him a sophomore. But KJ Lewis is a freshman, not 17. I'm sure he's already 18.
He's a true freshman, so he'll be the same age as Kylan Boswell.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, okay.
But not playing the same positions you said.
No, 6'4" wing.
More of a wing player. I think he fits the style. Again, we talk about the style of what Tommy Lloyd's trying to do and style of Arizona basketball. This is the guy you would recruit, right? This is the guy you'd want to come in here and hope you get a couple of years out of him, developing him into a potential NBA player, and then he leaves. I think the key for a guy like KJ Lewis is just, make that transition. He's got a lot of players around him that'll help make that transition. Boswell will help him make that transition. He knows what it's like. He came in as a 17-year-old, but he came in hurt too, remember, and he had to kind of work his way through. I think KJ Lewis, I'm excited to see what he can do. I know Tommy Lloyd will take all these guys at the pace that he feels they need to go. But a lot of times Tommy Lloyd wants these guys to let him know that that they're ready by showing them, in practice and in games. When they get opportunities, you got to perform.
Okay, so that's KJ Lewis. He's a wing. Now the next one we're going to bring up is we're going to go to the two international players now, Pat. And the first one is Matthias Crevis. And Crevis is a 7-footer from Lithuania, at least 7 feet. We even heard his
7'2", some say.
Well, yeah. From 7 feet to 7'2". According to Euro Spots, if I'm saying that correctly, he's an old school big. He can post up, strong around the basket, but struggled a little bit with defending around the perimeter, which I guess would be normal if you're an old school big.
Yep.
That picture is from FIBA, and Matthias Crevis led his team to whatever league title they led him to in Lithuania. And here's what I said. So Pat, I said this on the news, and I got a viewer upset at me on Twitter. You don't know with these international players. I mean, yeah, you could say you don't know with these American players, but I feel like you've got a little bit more of an idea with these American players because you're more familiar with the competition. Matthias Crevis could come here and be the next Tubelis, or he could be the next Henry Vesar, who was taken out of the lineup this year. You just don't know. I see a guy here who's going to compete for playing time with Henry Vesar and Dylan Anderson. Your thoughts on Matthias Crevis from Lithuania?
Well, I'm going to say this about anybody who's 6'10", 6'11", and above. You can't expect them to be a dominant force as a freshman. You just can't. Umar Ballo couldn't really find the minutes at Gonzaga. Came here and kind of developed into the guy that we know now as Umar Ballo, a force inside. You look at Henry Vesar. I know you're not a fan of Henry Vesar necessarily. I am a fan of Henry Vesar in the sense.
Well, it's not that. I just wanted more so he wouldn't get enough to get taken out of the lineup. They were going with 7 players. Tommy Lloyd didn't want to only play 7 guys. That really tells you something because he wanted to play 8 guys, and he's like, I'm looking for somebody to step up. And Vesar and Dylan Anderson and other guys couldn't do it.
Right, and that's why I think you
Tommy Lloyd wasn't high. Adama Ball, Tommy Lloyd wasn't high on his play last year.
I think you can't necessarily count on a freshman, even though he's 7'2" and highly touted, as Crevis is from Lithuania, and all the Europeans say he's the next coming of a prototypical old school center. I think Vesar is going to make a big step this year, and I think he is going to contribute. And I think a guy like Crevis can contribute because he's had international experience and he's been so good in Europe. But I wouldn't count on him being a guy that necessarily you're going to go to in a clutch situation. I think there are going to be other 7-footers ahead of him. But we also know that Tommy Lloyd likes to play a couple of 7-footers at times too. Maybe that'll be Vesar as well. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, this assumes Azuolas Tubelis doesn't come back, because if Tubelis and Ballo are both together, that's going to leave a lot of minutes for some of the other players, Vesar and Dylan Anderson. Yeah, I'm not counting on Tubelis coming back though.
I wasn't counting on him, but remember I said last week it's something that he's thinking about, and we got that sense this last week when he was in that NBA Combine. No, I'm planning on going, but I have till May 31st to decide, and I still have the decision to make. That's that kind of thing. Okay.
All right. So somebody who Matthias Crevis knows well, also from Lithuania, a 6'8" player, and the one I'm not sure how to pronounce here, and this has not been confirmed by Arizona. This is something that's been reported by Eurohoops and the others, but unlike Matthias Crevis, Arizona has not confirmed. Paulius Moraskis, I believe is probably how you pronounce his name, a 6'8" player from Lithuania. Let's see here. Same team as Crevis, also same team as Kirk Krisa. Now he's a year older. He's actually 19 years old, and he was eligible for the NBA draft, but decided to go the college route. A wing who is mobile and 42% from 3.
Yeah, that's impressive, Jason.
So
that's the one thing.
3,
yeah, that's
stood out. He and Pelle Larsson are guys they can go to for 3-pointers, whereas Keyshawn Johnson's shooting percentage wasn't quite there. He's not confirmed yet by Arizona.
Yeah, this is a depth guy, and it's now a well-established pipeline, Lithuania to Tucson, and I think that if nothing else, It's a guy that can help Crevis, settle into Tucson and the U of A and guys to hang out with, and maybe a guy that comes in off the bench and contributes, as you said, can hit the three. I don't expect a whole lot out of him, but again, when you're looking at a team that just needs to fill out and get some depth, and why not take a chance, Jason? Obviously, Tommy Lloyd knows what this guy can do and has probably watched a lot of film if he hasn't seen him in person, and he thought enough of him to bring him in. So I'll trust Tommy Lloyd on that one.
Yeah, so he'll be competing for minutes with Pelle Larsson, the other wings. I didn't mention or put Pelle Larsson on this list because he's new to the roster, kind of. I mean, he declared for the NBA draft with the ability, the option to come back. He probably just declared for the NBA draft for feedback. I mean, this is somebody who was a sixth man for Arizona last year. This is not somebody who's going to be drafted, but it's somebody who they could use they're shooting, and hopefully he makes a step up. And I've got no problem with the Pelle Larsson, the starting lineup, but he's got to play like a starter.
Yeah, he's got to play like a starter because he had starter minutes in a lot of ways. They just came off the bench.
Well, what happened was after Tommy Lloyd changed the lineup midway through and put Cedric Henderson in there, and then Pelle Larsson was on the bench. Pelle Larsson, it could have just been coincidence. He got hot.
Yeah.
Right. So he and Kylan Boswell were starting to play starter minutes there towards the end.
Sure they were.
So and we the players make a big deal about who's starting. We make a big deal about who's starting. The starting lineups are fun. They're part of the entertainment at McKell Center. But to the coaches, they're concerned with who's in the lineup at the end of the game.
That's right, and who's contributing to a win. And don't forget, Pelle Larsson is really good defensively, Jason. And I think that that part of it means he really should be in the start. You really want this guy in there as much as you can. He's going to have to be the big minutes player, I think, this year for Tommy Lloyd, if nothing else, just because he knows what Tommy Lloyd wants to do so well, and he can be such a big help out on the court for him. So hopefully Pelle Larsson learned something with this, going and testing the NBA free waters, dipping the toe in. But more than anything, I think he probably just did it so he knows what's going to happen next year when he's going to do it for real. That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah, and to me, I was talking about this who's starting. There's two spots open. To me, Kylan Boswell should be the starting point guard based on how he performed at the end of last year. Keyshawn Johnson is not coming here to come off the bench.
Right.
He started 39 games last year for San Diego State, and Omar Ballo is the starting center, right? So that leaves two spots at another guard position or a wing forward. Tommy Lloyd can go with a smaller lineup and put Pelle Larsson or Moraskis in there with Keyshawn Johnson, or he could put a big lineup in there. If Matthias Crevis is really that good and can play in there with Boswell. I don't know if he's got trouble defending the perimeter. That's two guys there.
That doesn't bode well.
Yeah, that's going to be that might be tough.
Did you mention Bradley too? You almost think he could work his way into the starting.
Well, yeah, he would be a guard, right? So
definitely he would be a guard. He would be a guard,
and he could be in there. And he would be in there with Kylan Boswell and Keyshawn Johnson. Yeah, if he plays that great early on.
And from what I understand, Keyshawn Johnson is kind of a combo forward, if you will. He can play small forward or big. If he can play 4 or 3 if you need. So he could be either one. So, I mean, there's a lot of options there. And as we mentioned, once the ball gets tipped up, the who's a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 probably doesn't matter a whole lot other than who's the 5, once that offense gets moving.
I'm most excited about Boswell and to see how he improves.
I agree. I think as a fandom of Wildcat Nation, everybody thinks that he's going to make a big jump. Not that he didn't already in a short period of time last year, but that this guy could be All-American right away, with by the end of the year, type of a jump.
No, we joke about sorry, Pat.
No, I was just going to by a young 18-year-old.
Yeah,
young 18.
We joke about the age, but there's a reason why he reclassified as a 17-year-old. You know how many 17-year-olds are that good that they can play in Power 5 basketball the way that he did and handled himself. Every time he's out there, if somebody didn't know, he'd look like a senior. He looks and plays like somebody beyond his years. All right, so those are the new additions to the Arizona basketball, the men's team. I didn't forget anybody, did I, Pat? I mean,
no, I don't think so.
Guys coming back from last year who didn't play much, like Boro Vaikanen, if I'm saying his name right.
Yeah.
Adama Ball left. Obviously, we know Kirk Creesa transferred to West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sorry to see him go.
No.
No.
think we are. By the way, Jason, more on Keyshawn Johnson real quick.
Yeah.
From everything I read, he became a huge fan favorite there at San Diego State. And
well, why did he leave then? That's my biggest issue. I want to know
well,
why
I
he
think,
left.
as I said, I think his ceiling, that team ceiling already was reached, and it was only going to go down. So I think he looks at it like, I got one more year of eligibility. I'm not ready for the NBA yet, and there's only one way to go in this program, and that's to take a step back. So why am I going to stay here and take a step back? And yeah, he loves San Diego State. Where did he have his big reveal party? At San Diego. I mean, this kid, doesn't want to. I'm sure he doesn't want to have to leave San Diego State, but I think it was the writings on the wall. They're not going to be as good. And if he wants to take another step, maybe 1 year of being underneath Tommy Lloyd and learning from a guy who's considered one of the top coaches right now in the country is probably a good move for him. Let's not forget, Tommy Lloyd has the record for most wins in the first 2 years of any coach ever in the history of college basketball. And he's got a track record now of bringing in some of these transfers just last year and getting the most out of them and another 30-plus win season. So, there's already a resume being built there that I think these guys transfer in and go, yeah, I can do what these guys did last year as fifth-year seniors.
Yeah, and he does have Carter Bryant coming in for next year. He's a stud player for next year. So
well, and don't forget, next year they're already ranked 4th in the country with their recruits coming in next year with Bryant and Phillips, 5-star and a 4-star. Yeah,
Phillips.
They're ranked.
Jabari, is his first name Jabari? What's his first name?
Jamari.
Yep. Okay.
And it's North Carolina, Iowa State, Texas A&M, Arizona, Baylor, and Duke are the top 6, and Arizona's 4. That's right now. It's the early. I mean, it's a whole year away. But for those that say that Tommy Lloyd couldn't recruit and they were all over him a month ago, it's everything happens in kind of cycles. When's the last time Duke was number 6 in the country? It's been a little while. Even Duke drops down a little bit. Even North Carolina drops down. Now they're back to number 1 again. So, yeah.
All right, very good. All right, Pat, any final thoughts?
No, just it's a shame it's only late May and we got to wait a long time for basketball, but we've got football to talk about coming up too.
Football's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. Can't wait to see how Wildcats do, of course. We've got a little situation here with the quarterback and certainly Coach Prime and what's going to happen with the Pac-12. So should leave us with some things to talk about for sure. All right, this has been The Huddle, KGUN9's weekly sports streaming talk show. For Pat Parris, I'm Jason Barr. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you right back here next week at the same time.